Okay. Hi, Richard. Thanks for agreeing to have a chat with me today. We've been trying to arrange, first a meeting between me and you for a while,
Yes.
and then a chat. I was really curious to talk with you because you've been posting over the last few months a little bit of interesting blog posts across visualization and AI, little experiments that you are doing. I'm also doing experiments, and I thought it would be nice to have a little recording where you talk about your experiments. And I don't know, maybe if you can also show
Absolutely.
some images, right?
Sure.
But
Absolutely.
before we do that, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and the book that you wrote a few years ago. I don't remember how many, and then we can move it from there.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Richard Brath. I've been working in design and visualization for a very long time. My first degree was in architecture, but when I graduated, there were no jobs in architecture. So I fell back on computer science and then did a master's, and I completed a PhD in the 2010s. And in the 2010s, the research area that I had was particularly about visualizing with text. And the reason that came about was that as I had been working in visualization for more than a decade, everybody was doing visualization on quantitative data. And I was actually working in environments where there are phenomenal amounts of text available, but nobody was trying to visualize it. And I even had difficulty getting people interested in possibly visualizing it. And I had difficulty myself thinking about how might I visualize things when you're working with qualitative information. It's so different. It's so, it doesn't fit the foundations, the very underpinnings of data visualization. Text doesn't have a way to even fit in there, right? And so that was the genesis of learning to work with text computationally, which got me to learn NLP tools. And then as LLMs came along, they were just so much better than NLP, right? Like the amount of code you had to write to do NLP just 10 years ago was crazy, and the quality was always a little bit suspect. And so AI has significantly changed it. And so it was just a natural progression from using NLP tools to using AI tools. And then the AI tools have just increased in their quality so absolutely much since then, right?
Yeah.
So,
You know, a brief comment about visualizing text is such a big gap, and I think there's way more work to do there. And there are, of course, researchers who've done some work there, but it's amazing. And in fact, the other day I was also posting this idea about whether we have a system to think about any model to think about qualitative data visualization, right? And text is a big component of that.
yes.
And I don't think we have a good reference model for things, as you just said, right? If it's not quantitative, what is it, right? how do
Yeah,
how do
yeah.
you represent it, right?
Exactly. So the model, I make a joke. There should be a joke that says, a statistician and a perceptual psychologist and somebody else walk into a bar, and what you get out of it is data visualization, right? And so you're bound to stats and perceptual psychology and computer science, and you're missing a whole bunch of other things that should be fundamental to that. And that framing, right? That framing restricts you. It's Marshall McLuhan,
Yeah,
if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so we've got
yeah,
a hammer, and we actually need a whole suite of power tools. So in my research, I'm just going to show a couple examples here because I
yeah.
think it's so
Please
important.
do. Yeah,
And that is, so if you don't have the language for it, from data visualization, you look outside. Other communities have figured this out, right? And so,
yeah,
there's incredible maps. There's
yeah,
incredible things in typography.
yeah.
That is a
Absolutely.
tree. Everybody recognizes that as a tree, but
Yeah,
it actually reads literally like a paragraph, right? And so these things are fantastically amazing to look at
yeah,
these historic examples of what people can do when you just make text the center of the of the visualization, right? And of course the periodic table is in there too.
absolutely.
So that is kind of a world of inspiration that you can work with.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I think it's incredible. And that was the entree. And then, like I said,
yeah.
from there, it was just like, well, hey, now I've got a better tool. I'm going to use that instead.
I'm now wondering if it's computer science fault because it's our obsession with making everything a system. And then when you make a system, you have to simplify and focus on what is doable. And right, and there's this really nice model that we basically inherited from Bertin first, and then all the other people, and then things like the grammar of graphics. It's neat. It's very well. Things are composable, right? But if you diverge from that, you're
It's
completely
very
lost.
computational, right? Exactly. So,
Yes,
so
very
these things fit very
computational.
nicely. A grammar, I can compute a
Yeah,
grammar. We talk about grammars all the time in computer
yeah,
science. But if you
yeah,
think about it from a designer's perspective, a designer is never constrained to think like that. So designers always have a much more exciting, fluid view of what might be feasible, what are the bounds that you're actually working with or working against.
yeah.
And that would be a task or an approach that I always would have used as a designer. As soon as you have something that you don't know how to handle, well, somebody's probably thought of this before. They probably have some pretty good ideas. Let's just go look at those ones.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
doesn't fit your model. We're going to go build a new model.
yeah. Exactly,
I wouldn't say what I created was a completely different model. I really did fit it into, or try to fit it into, the standard model that we use in computer science of marks
yeah,
and
yeah.
all of those kinds of things and whatnot. But yeah, it's your model can limit you. It can help you and it can limit you.
Absolutely, yes. So, as I said at the beginning, I'm really curious to hear from you what you think about AI, the use of AI in visualization. And it seems to me that you've been going through a journey, and probably this journey is gonna last for a while. I have my own rabbit hole myself. How did you get started there? What are your general thoughts also? Just even
Yeah.
before we talk about specifics.
Yeah. So I always found, I had to get a PhD degree done. So I had to learn enough NLP to do it.
Yeah,
And I had always heard about all these great things that people were doing with AI and language models. And, you hear Hendrik speak. I'm sure your viewers know Hendrik Strobelt.
Hendrik
And,
Strobel.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, all the fantastic things digging into the innards of the language models. And that was
yeah.
beyond
Maybe we should explain
what I
that
was
for
going to
those
do.
who don't know
Yeah,
about what Hendrik does. He's a researcher at IBM who does mostly has done a lot of work on visualization to visualize what models do internally, right? So that you can hopefully understand how they do what they do and also when they fail. So yeah,
right, right, right.
pretty
So
fascinating work.
So the first inkling that I had was this was a much better tool than the NLP and a replacement, and it could do different kinds of things than classical NLP. And one of the first things, right, is that it could do is summarization. And summarization with classic NLP is very, very difficult or impossible. And it could do it very well. And so I had this inkling of the idea still in my development workflow that I did during my PhD, that I could use an LLM to do summarization, and there could be
Mm,
some really interesting possibilities if I use the LLM. And in that case, it's very early days, so you're just using the LLM as a data processor, not as
yeah,
a visualization creator or anything. And LLMs are still great at actually, data processing of qualitative data. But that was one of my first things that I did. Now, if you want, I'll show you a quick little interactive example. Would that be
please
useful? Would
do.
that be
Yes.
fun to do? So let's just try the screen share. Am I supposed to see something here? Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think one of the very first ones that I had ever done was this one, and this is literally just Alice in Wonderland, and it summarizes into about 2 pages of HTML. So
Yeah.
that's actually pretty interesting and cool. And basically, what I do is take every paragraph or 2 paragraphs, and so here's the original text. And here's a summarized text. So if you just want to
Yeah.
read, here's the entire first chapter of Alice in Wonderland. Alice is bored. Alice meets a white rabbit. The rabbit has a watch. Alice falls into a hole. And here's actually one of the really fun parts is, I wrote a Python script to do all of this, to generate this text, and I had $75 in credits. And I blew through almost the entire credits building this one little tiny application that does this summarization of Alice in Wonderland, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah.
how far have we come since this is before ChatGPT, right?
Wow. Yeah,
Using one of the early commercial ones that actually did, pretty good job. Alice is bored. She meets a
yeah,
rabbit.
yeah, yeah,
And it's basically it's not hardcore visualization. It's somewhere in between. This is just
yeah,
the pattern from
yeah,
Ben Schneiderman of
yeah, yeah,
overview
yeah.
first,
Overview
details
first.
on demand, right? Like here you go. And so
Overview first in text,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Overview first in text. And so this was one of the first ones that I did, and I had a lot of fun doing it. Right? It feels fun. It feels interesting. It feels totally different and unconstrained from everything else I had previously done. And so after doing this, I was hooked.
yeah. Very good. So, what do you think of the latest crazy tools that we have here? It's
The
just I
latest,
every day I'm blown away. So I don't know if you feel the same. Like
yeah,
feels like
absolutely. I
the
feel
more you push it, the more
absolutely
you get. So
absolutely crazy on what you can do with the tools these days. I tend to use Claude a
Claude,
lot here, Claude,
yeah.
and it's just incredible the kinds of things that you can do. Uh, did I have org chart? This was just earlier this week. Um,
Uh-huh.
I have to verify my age. Everybody's going to see
Interesting.
my age, Claude. Now you need it. You haven't needed it for years. Wow. This always happens during demos, right?
Of course. Give demo effect.
Okay. All right. So this is really just a simple example. I
Yeah.
literally was like, earlier this week, I just was on Yahoo Finance,
Yeah.
looking at a page on a bank,
Yeah.
and said, "Oh, here's a list of the executives at the bank." Sure,
Yeah.
Claude. Create an org chart for me out of this, and I want the compensation values in there. Figure out how to put it in. Maybe put it as a bar
Uh-huh.
inside a tile, and then it's the data. That's it, right? And then
Uh-huh.
all of that generates, an org chart. And not only is it an org chart, right? Like it's got information hierarchy in it. If the data is valid, it makes the bars. The bars are all properly scaled. If there's no data, it even writes NA on there. It fits the long
Yeah.
labels. If there's like, this is incredible. I mean, it's not a
It's
perfect org
incredible.
chart. It's missing some
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
got a
Yeah.
legend. The legend doesn't match.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but for a single prompt with almost no hinting of what to
Yeah.
do, it just says org chart and
Yeah.
I want compensation in there. Uh, it crafts an amazing example and does a lot of things that I didn't even ask for that are not bad guesses.
Yeah.
And so how far it has gone is like incredible compared to like just trying to summarize a paragraph and spending $75 versus just throwing something randomly in and getting a not bad visualization out of it.
Yes. So what so you've been trying so I'm just curious to hear from you, are there different type of experiments that you tried? So for instance, here you're giving Claude some data and an indication of what to do with it, right? That's one way to use it. We can also upload the data sets, right? By the way, we can upload a table and then ask to do something, right? What else? Have you tried something else?
So you can see literally here I've just cut and paste the data, which is pretty similar to uploading the data. I think the general approach has been kind of like that to do these things, and part of it has been trying to get repeatable prompts, which
Mm,
last as of last summer. Uh, it was a difficulty just to even get these tools to generate a visualization,
yeah,
let
yeah,
alone an
exactly. And
interactive
now you're
visualization
doing
and so forth.
wow.
And so now we've got visualizations with not just the visualization that comes out looking very good. It's got the right legend on it. It's got links through to, I'm able to do the clicks and all kinds of things. So it's very good. And what I've really been trying to do most recently is just trying to figure out if there's a more consistent way of formulating the prompts so that I can get a better result or a more consistent kind of result. And that is the kind of thing I've been talking about on my blog, right? So on my blog here, the latest blog post was literally the formula that I'm currently using to create visualizations, and not just standard visualizations, right? So there's a lot of people out there. Here's a bar chart. Here's a pie chart. Even the org chart you saw, but it's always a visualization with a little bit more, a little bit different, a little bit novel,
let's go
something.
through it for a moment. I'm really curious. Can you zoom in a little because I can't read from here?
Sure.
So you're trying to kind of like to standardize the prompts that you use to use a little bit of a template.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And so here, this is just basically a TSV file, right? So it's pasting in the data that you care about.
Yeah.
And then I say, well, I've got 4 different kinds of plots that I'm getting good results on, and bar, table, scatter. But these are textual plots, like the ones that I had just flipped through here, that have all of this text on them. So they're non-standard, right? But I want to create those fairly consistently. So it's made up of a few sections. The first section is an intro that says it's going to be a text-centric data visualization. So the first part of the prompt is this is a cue of what's different. It's not a standard visualization, it's a text visualization.
Yeah.
I also want it to be in HTML so that I can open it in a browser. I want you to use JavaScript and D3. If it doesn't choose D3, a lot of other tools are more limited in their expressiveness, and so it will get trapped. So I explicitly guide it and tell it to use D3, right? So that's my intro. And then I've got, well, which kind of visualization do you want? The text bar, the text table, the text scatter plot. So let's just take a look at the scatter plot, for example. And I just say, this will be a variant of a bubble plot. The x-axis will be, and then insert whatever numeric column you have. The y-axis will be a numeric column. Set the range of the axes to minimum and maximum. So these are things where it will make choices, and I just want to lock it down on the choices right off the bat. And then I tell it, for the mark, you're going to use text instead of circles. So here's the difference. And you have to, if you're just filling in the blanks, you have to put in a phrase column. And if it's long, you have to wrap the text, make the mark roughly squarish, use tight leading so it's not spread out, use collision detection. So these are all the extra things that it needs to kind of consider. Make sure the text doesn't move outside of the chart area and so on. So this sets up the core of the plot. And, so that's what we would call layout in visualization. And then you got visual encoding. So here you go, visual attributes. If you want to put on color, use this phrase. If you want to use numeric color instead of categoric color, use this phrase. If you want to set font size, here's a phrase. You want to set font weight. If you want to use typeface. If you want to add a tooltip, do this. If you want to add a click, do something like this. And then stick your data on at the end of the prompt. And that's it. And then you do that. And so here's the example of all of those pieces cut and paste together. And that gives me the chart that you were just looking at.
A bar chart with text.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you said you're using D3. You're asking to produce D3 code in JavaScript, right? And then you run it in your own environment, basically.
So it will usually run it. Sometimes the LLMs have, these side browsers built in where they can run it. And sometimes it runs okay in their browser, sometimes it doesn't. So I always ask for it to generate HTML so that I can open it up in a browser separately and test it out. I also will, if I put it, then I think I then cut and paste it over into something like CodePen. And then, so I split the HTML and the CSS and the code apart. And you can see it, it's incredible. It's incredible how much code they can create and get working, right? So these things will be a few hundred lines of code. And if I was working on my thesis and writing this, I would be spending half a day or a day.
And also the comments sometimes are pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
The level of commenting, the precision of the comments is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. And so then you can easily override this. Then as a result, even if you didn't know a lot about D3, right? You're just
Yeah,
using
you could
these
just
SVG
fiddle
attributes
with the
to kind
values
of
and see what
figure it out
happens.
and say, oh, what
Yeah,
happens,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? And it's an immediate impact on there. So it's that's kind of the current workflow that I tend to use a fair bit.
That's a very cool idea. So you have a number of prompts that you reuse that are basically templates and to generate different kind of things.
Yep.
Very,
Yeah.
very interesting.
So I mean, you think about it. It's what did I hear about it? It's like a Slacker programming or something like that. It's kind of like programming. You're still putting blocks of things together, but
Yeah, but
it's
in
not
natural
programming
language.
code. It's natural
Yeah,
language description of the thing
yeah,
that you
yeah, yeah,
want,
yeah. Yeah.
and and the results are pretty good. So I used to worry about uh, when I wrote prompts that it generated code and I could really go in and work with the code. Now I'm less worried about actually going in and working with the code. It was just for the purposes of this blog post so I could show people and they could see the code and see the
Of
results and
course.
everything. But
Yeah,
90% of the times it's like that example I was just showing you with the hierarchy. I don't need to take the
yeah,
code out. It,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
everything runs fine where it is.
So I never really tried to do anything with trying to use these AI tools to generate JavaScript or D3 with D3 type of code. I'm always just letting I try things with ChatGPT and automatically uses Python and the Python libraries to generate visualizations by default.
Right.
And
So I have found that each LLM seems to have a preference, or at least the
yeah,
versions they
exactly.
make available have a preference for a
Yeah,
certain language, and the Claude has a bias towards JavaScript, which is why I've kind of leaned in that direction because interactive
yeah,
visualizations, and I'm more familiar with the JavaScript
yeah.
side of the
And,
world,
and it's
anyways.
certainly more flexible, right?
Right. Yeah. 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 Exactly. So there's an expressiveness in D3 that
Yeah,
I find very enjoyable. So I will use that, and then it will go off and generate that code and run that code directly in the
in the
browser. So if I just
environment.
go in here and say,
Yeah.
hey, I want to create a text-centric
Uh-huh,
uh,
uh-huh.
visualization, and
Yeah.
here's the data, and let's go find a data set. Actually, I probably need to use the same one because the
Uh-huh.
mappings are all
Yeah,
set
yeah.
up
Let's see how it looks
to
like.
what we had. Legos. I don't want the Lego data set because it's not set up for that mapping.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. Here's some other samples. So I keep sample data sets around all the
Yeah,
time, right?
yeah.
Simpsons catchphrases. It's not set up for that one either. Here we go. So here's earworms. All right, so let's get some of the classic ones on here. I'll just grab a few of those. It'll slow it down with the more that it has to work. And so that's the data set. And the data sets also, I don't know if you've tried anything where you do it, but just generate the data sets
Oh yeah.
using the LLM, right? So
Yeah,
I used to spend a
absolutely.
huge amount of time digging for data sets,
Yeah.
and now it's like, let's see what the
But that's
LLM
another
will,
thing.
will generate.
So for instance, what happened to me for teaching, sometimes you want toy data sets that show something that you want to show, right? And and I had situations where I wanted to show a specific pattern or condition, and I just asked ChatGPT to generate synthetic data set with that kind of pattern, and it does it, of course.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
of
and
well, I added of course. Actually, not of course. It's pretty crazy that it does it, but it does. So, yeah,
it is very crazy. And actually, I don't know if you just saw that go by. I pasted in here, right, the
yeah,
question of what I wanted it to create and the
yeah,
data
yeah,
set. The first
yeah,
step, it's a multi-step process. The first step it did was
yeah,
analyze all of the data. And,
yeah,
here's a summary of what we've
yeah,
got. It's figured out some min maxes on
yeah, yeah.
here. And now it's writing the
No,
code for the actual visualization, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So these things are actually kind of incredible. And you can see it's embedding the data. So it's, it's kind of repetitive.
yeah.
But it's it's still very cool.
It's
It'll do
ridiculous.
things in code that I don't know. It's better at CSS than I am, right? So it's put all this stuff together here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so it's pretty great.
I
The
actually, you made me realize I never tried Claude for I did try Claude. I use Claude, but never tried Claude to generate visualizations. And wow, it's
Here's your
powerful.
D3 code now.
It's
Now you can
wow.
see the D3 stuff coming out.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
got my
yeah, yeah, yeah,
SVG append attributes.
yeah,
So if your students have to do D3,
yeah, yeah. I know,
Claude can do
I
it all
know,
for
I
them
know.
now.
Yeah, of course. Wow,
Yeah,
that's
we've got
pretty
a tooltip
amazing.
put in here.
Yeah,
It's better at tooltips than I am,
yeah,
right? It's got the mouse in,
and
mouse out transitions coming in here. Like you can see everything. It's like, and how much time did you spend writing this kind of stuff? And now you can just watch it go by.
you can watch it.
So
Yeah,
this is the so what it does. What's super important here, maybe one of the most important messages is, as a designer, I don't really want to spend a lot of time writing code. That is not where I want to spend my time. I want to spend my
yeah,
time innovating new ways to think about creating
yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah,
And this gives me this incredible flexibility to try out lots of design ideas
yeah,
very quickly, right?
yeah. Look
And
at
so
this.
this is incredible. I've got Bob. I don't know if you can read that, but here, let's make it a little bigger.
No, yeah,
Now you can read it, but we've got
yeah,
Bob Dylan blowing in the wind,
yeah, and it's
um,
interactive.
and it's
With
interactive with tooltips on it.
it's crazy. It's really crazy.
So
And
this is crazy,
yeah,
and it's fantastic for trying out all of these different kinds of things. It's
well,
quite
now
incredible.
it's great for prototyping, right? You have an
Yeah.
idea in mind. I have a question. So one thing that I found interesting, maybe a little painful, and I've heard other people having same problems. And it's also a classic problem when you want to work with more generative AI tools that generate images. You sometimes you get almost there, and then there's one thing that you want to change, and that single thing is so hard to change, right? This is where these tools are a little weird. They do incredible things, and then there's one detail that you want to change, and somehow you can't change.
Yeah. So I think I would comment on that by saying that when you get close and then you have to write another prompt to fix it, and then it can't quite fix that, and you write another prompt, and you kind of get in this loop where you think you're fixing it, but then it introduces one new error and fixes the one that you wanted, and you can't quite get
Yeah.
it fixed. So there's a couple of approaches that I have on that. Is one is I try to get
Mm-hmm.
it as close as possible in the first prompt. So that those prompts that you saw that I had were pretty big.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't try to build it like, okay, just do this a little bit, then do this a little bit, then do this a little bit. I
Mm-hmm.
try and make a
Mm-hmm.
very complete initial prompt.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that way I don't have to get into a lot of modifications, because if that
Mm-hmm.
modification cycle becomes too long, it starts messing up.
You
At
get
least with the
stuck.
current
Yeah.
generation, it gets stuck, it starts getting confused about previous instructions and so forth. And so I think that's a really important one, is that you don't want this long conversation in what you've created. So you need this kind of concise, precise language up front in what you're creating.
Yeah, but you can also imagine these tools. I mean, I think most of us are basically quote unquote playing with these tools, but there are people who probably are currently using these tools or will be using these tools in their actual projects, right? And if a tool brings you 99% there, then you have to put your hands on it. I think it's still fine, right?
Yeah, we are definitely using that in my workplace. So in my introduction, I didn't say it, but I work full time for a software company, and we design and build data visualizations. And of course,
Yeah,
we're
I know.
using language models to process data. We're using language models on the analytics as well,
Yeah,
and we're using language models on the output. Right, like it fits
yeah, yeah,
everywhere
yeah, yeah, yeah.
in what we're doing.
So, what do you think? So, okay, this is great, and we are really excited about it. So, dark side of it, it seems to me that verification is a huge problem, and feel free to disagree. I would be curious to hear what you say there. We did a little bit of, well, not a little bit. We did quite a few experiments in my lab to see. We have this concept of plausibility that we're trying to develop, which is basically like how plausible does the plot look like compared to what I asked? And of course, because right, so when there's a clear mistake, then you detect it and you can fix it. You can create a new prompt. You can do 1,000 different things. But sometimes what it does is that it does things that are clear mistakes, but are really, well, not clear mistakes. Sorry, they're mistakes. They're subtle, and unless you verify, you won't be able to detect it. And so if there's some data processing in between, some filtering, some aggregation, and it does some of these steps are wrong, but the results look plausible. Now I think it's a really big deal. And how do you verify that? So I'm wondering what you think
Yeah.
about that, because that's a problem that we have seen over and over.
Well, it's a problem that we've seen all along with LLMs. The mistakes used to be bigger, and the mistakes are getting smaller and smaller,
Smaller and
right? If
smaller.
I go
Yeah.
all the way back to my original Alice summary example, right? The mistakes
Yeah.
were very big. Alice is drunk. No, Alice was not drunk. Alice had drunk the bottle. Alice is not drunk, right?
Yeah.
So those were the kinds of mistakes we had 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And they were more easy to detect, and they were more funny, right? And there was still, this was again before Chat GPT,
Yeah.
so we thought it was all funny, and it was still an up and coming technology that people were dismissing. Well, Chat GPT showed us otherwise. Um, we still have a challenge that there are going to be mistakes. And there's a lot of different ways to think about a tool making mistakes, right? In
Yeah.
computer science, we've always worked with computer science, since the 1940s as a very deterministic tool, and everything must be completely deterministic. It's only in the
Yeah.
last couple of years that we've had to shift our thinking. But if I were to work with you, Enrico, I don't think of you as a robot. I'm perfectly willing for you to make statements that I'm willing to contradict and have a whole conversation on. And here, the language model is just my junior assistant, and my junior assistant is doing things, and it should be my responsibility as the human in charge, because I
Yeah.
should still be the human in charge,
Yeah.
to look over what
Yeah.
the language model has created. So there's a level of responsibility that the human should own in working with these things.
Yeah.
So you can think of it as a great assistant, and a great assistant who sometimes fails miserably, and
Yeah.
sometimes a great assistant who comes up with really great ideas that you didn't think of. So
Yeah.
it's not bad that way.
Yeah. And I think another element there maybe is, I may be wrong, but to a certain extent, verification is probably most of the time less work than creation. There may be edge cases there. I don't know if it's a good rule. I have an intuition that it's, well, I don't know. I'm undecided. I'm on the fence there, right? Um, but I have an intuition that there are many cases where verifying something is easier than creating something, but probably not for everything. So differentiating between these two is an interesting problem. And also,
Yeah.
how do we not? I think an interesting open question is, can we get to a situation where doing something manually would actually be faster and more effective, more reliable? But now we are all used to do it this way, that we do also the things that are easy to do manually.
Right.
That
So
could be a problem.
yeah, verification is an interesting problem, right? And I think it's got similarities to some of the things we've already talked about. It's in some respects, you've got to be able to articulate how to do the verification,
Yeah,
because there's many different kinds of errors that could happen. The one of the answers in the world of these AI models, of course, is like a adversarial type of model, right? Where you can have one model that generates something,
good point.
and I could just, write in here, can you critique uh, your own code for improvements or errors, right? So, I
Yeah,
mean, yes, I could use another
self-reflection.
AI,
Yeah,
or I could just use the AI that I'm already running
yeah,
to do its own analysis.
yeah,
And yes, absolutely, right? So
yeah,
there's, it's going to tell me all the things that it hasn't done here.
yeah,
So that's great.
yeah,
Um,
Look at
This
this.
is,
Yeah,
this is
missing
the
data
extend beyond the bars, right?
validation, static
Yeah.
data. Yeah,
So
yeah,
you can use, it can be LLMs all the way down, right? I can
yeah,
have one LLM generate the answer. I can have another LLM critique the answer. I can have another one make sure that the language and bias are appropriate. I can have another
yeah.
one, I could do another one to do translation on here, for example, and so on and so on, right?
And
So I think it,
maybe it's similar to what we always did with software development, right? So if you're developing software for an airplane, you have certain right constraints. But if you are developing your, I don't know, code for your homepage, maybe it's not the same
right,
level of right
right.
scrutiny. So yeah,
Yeah. So it's a super good question. Everybody will be very careful about the airplanes. And we saw actually that get a lapse in human-based programming, right? Because the 737 crash, it should be an HCI textbook example now.
yeah,
The failures of the 737s that crashed with the
yeah,
fly-by-wire and the missing feedback and so on,
yeah,
right? And that's
yeah,
completely a human performance problem, interface, literally an interface performance problem, right? And so that's a good one to
yeah,
point out. But then you get all kinds of things aren't as critical as an airplane, right? And so what if
yeah,
the software is wrong in the microwave oven? Well, maybe it means your food gets burned, or maybe I don't know what happens if it doesn't stop, right? Will a fire start and your house burn down? And would people actually check for those kinds of edge conditions? And if
yeah,
it's an LLM, we might have some more problems like that creep up.
yeah. I want to ask you one last thing. Another way to use these tools that I have seen around for or in visualization is to ask them to interpret what they see, right? And it also works with images. Or I have seen you also. I've seen examples from you where you upload an image and ask to extract data. By the way, right?
Mhm.
So there's also this aspect of data extraction that seems interesting, but even more interesting is this interpretation, because interpretation is new. It's not something that to the best of my knowledge, was really, really hard to do, right? Well, we have data mining, pattern matching type of things in computer science, but it's not interpretation, right? And now you can upload a chart or create a chart and ask to read it,
Yeah.
right? And that's another silly thing somehow. And I don't know exactly what to think about it, because, and also what the applications are for something like that.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting area that I haven't explored very deeply, and I can give you a couple of quick examples. One of them is that I do a fair bit of work with the technical analysis community.
Mm.
That's a financial services
Financial, yeah.
application where people are looking at, basically time series
Stock
charts like
market, yeah.
stock market charts. And people in that community use analytics like moving averages, but they also talk about patterns. They talk about an uptrend, downtrend, head and shoulders pattern, things like that. And I found that the models are very good at finding and identifying and naming those patterns
Mm.
in the data. And so like that is one
Wow.
interesting simple example. And it's a powerful example because those phrases that we use, like head and shoulders or cup and handle or bottom or top or support and resistance, are very connotative. They're easy for us to grasp and handle. So if I can give you a large set of data and then annotate it and tell you, here are some patterns, these are the patterns that matter that you should care about, that's actually really interesting and powerful. The
Yeah.
second one is more of a funny example, and it's almost it's that problem of interpretation. But interpretation in this case, I would say it's not my primary research initiative that I'm
Uh-huh.
going after. So here's what we're doing is just as a test is racehorses. You can bet on racehorses. There's images of those
Uh-huh.
racehorses. Let's pass each of the racehorse to the model, and have the model score the horse on a bunch of different attributes, and then we'll pick on whichever horse has the best attributes coming out of that. It's a lot of fun, and it actually can do okay in some of the predictions. I haven't become rich. I haven't put a huge amount of money in this, But it says, you can take this data that is very qualitative and unstructured and turn it into something that's structured. What bothers me in part about that is, yes, it does turn it into quantitative, but it's also forcing the problem of trying to turn everything back into quantitative data. And I
Yeah,
would highly argue that there's a lot of problems that should not be turned into quantitative data. Horse racing,
yeah,
maybe yes, but if you're trying to do community engagement and community development and so forth, you need to understand issues that are not quantitative issues, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
If
yeah.
you want to understand problems in politics, those are not
Yeah,
quantitative
of
issues.
course. Yeah,
And so we need a whole environment that works flexibly with this qualitative information. And we've got a tool set now, right? So I'm very excited.
yeah. I am very excited too, and as I said, every day I'm blown away. I don't know exactly what to think about it. And well, Richard, I think we could go on for another couple hours. Maybe that's part one, right? And I hope to see you in person sometimes. And I don't know if you have heard, but we are now organizing a sort of regular meetup in Boston on visualization plus AI. We had the first one last week, and we invite two guest speakers, typically one more academic, one more industry and government, and try to build a community around it. So if you ever happen to be in town, let me know, because it would be great to have you as a speaker.
Yeah. I will be happy to let you know next time that I'm in Boston, and or maybe if you have a schedule in advance of the time slots that you're
Yes,
expecting, maybe
yes, I'll
somewhere in
send
the
it to you.
fall I can line up with one of the ones that you have.
Yeah, why don't you remind our viewers where they can find information about you and your blog post with these experiments?
Sure. I should have had a slide prepared for this,
It's all right.
but it's very simple here. It's just you can see it on the top here. It's richardbrath .wordpress.com.
Okay.
Uh, that will get you to me. That will get you all of the AI fun things that I've been exploring, and it will also get you links at the top to my books that I've done as well.
And you are also, remind me, in which social media you are on LinkedIn, right?
LinkedIn is mostly where I am
Mostly where
posting
you're
these
active.
days. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks so much, Richard. That's been lots of fun.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye bye.